Continuing with the David Williams The World's Worst Children's Short Stories, Miss Petula Perpetual-Motion. Miss Petula Perpetual-Motion. This is the story of a girl who would not sit still. Miss Petula Perpetual-Motion was forever in motion, whether she was in lesson, in church, or even playing musical statues. Some part of her would always be moving. It might be her foot or her arm or even her entire body. It would start with a little wiggle, then become a waggle, before turning into a jiggle, progressing to a joggle. Next, she would be cartwheeling across the room, creating pandemonium wherever she went. Petula was even in motion as she slept. Sometimes the other girls at her posh boarding school, Modesty Place, would hear a noise in the dead of night. They'd peek out from under their bed covers and see Petula ballet dancing across the dormitory with her eyes closed. One day, Petula's rather grand headmistress announced that the girls of Modesty Place were to go on an awfully special school trip. "Quiet, girls," ordered the lady as she stood on stage at assembly. Miss Prigg's grey hair was styled in a magnificent bouffant hairdo, and a pair of half-moon spectacles hung from her neck on a gold chain. If she was about to tell someone off, which was often, the spectacles would be lifted up to her eyes so she could stare her victim down and give them the willies. "Now, girls, we are going to take a school trip to somewhere your beloved headmistress, has chosen myself. We are going to visit my favourite Pauline Museum. Needless to say, I expect you to be on your absolute best behaviour. I don't want any mishaps." Suddenly, all eyes were on Petula. "Oh no," thought the good girls sitting in the front row. "Oh yes," thought the bad girls sitting in the back row. To make matters worse, or better, depending on whether you were a good or bad girl, Petula was bouncing up and down on her seat like it was a space hopper. Boing, boing, boing. "Porcelain has long been a personal passion of mine," continued the headmistress, who loved making lengthy speeches. "Now, I, your beloved headmistress, want to share the passion with you. This museum is the best in Europe. Every single piece on display is a priceless antique. There shall be no accidents. Do I make myself clear?" There was a faint murmur from the pupils. "I said, do I make myself clear?" she bellowed. "Yes, headmistress," chimed the girls in unison. "Excellent. Now, Miss Petula Perpetual-Motion, I need to see you in my study right away." The girl glowed red as a tomato diving in fire engine. What had she done wrong now? Surely the time when she accidentally spun backwards into the science block had been put behind her. Yes, the experiment taking place that day went badly wrong. Yes, there was still a huge hole in the floor where the acid burned through it. But Petula swore it was an accident. Yes, her triple jump on sports day became an octuple jump, taking in 8 different moves, and resulted in Petula karate kicking the local mayor, sending him tumbling off the winner's podium. But again, the girl insisted it was an accident, and yes, of course, who could forget the time at the school Christmas carol concert when Petula couldn't stand still in church, cartwheeled up the aisle and sent the vicar flying headfirst into the choir. But these were all accidents. It wasn't her fault. She just couldn't keep still. Petula even had a note from her mother to prove it. "To whom it may concern, my darling daughter, Miss Petula Perpetual-Motion, cannot stay still for more than a second. It's not her fault, so she must not be punished in any way. If she causes damage to property, buildings, people, or animals, please take great care of my darling daughter, yours truthfully, Petula's mother." With some trepidation, the girl knocked on the door of the headmistress's study. "Knock, knock, knock." "Come," barked the headmistress from inside. "Knock, knock, knock, knock." Petula's hand did not stop knocking. "I said come!" An angry-sounding voice. Still, Petula couldn't stop her hand from knocking. Knock, 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 knock. "Oh, for goodness' sake," roared the headmistress. Miss Prigg yanked open the door and Petula knock, knock, knock. The lady slapped bang on her nose. Boink! Ow! "Sorry, Miss Prigg," replied the girl with a hint of a smile. It was amusing to see the lady fuming. "Come into my study this instant," ordered the headmistress. Petula forward rolled into the room, which Miss Prigg always had kept spotless. In fact, an old cleaner was in there at the moment, busily polishing some school trophies on a table. "You, out," ordered the headmistress. Miss Prigg was curt to anyone who considered below her. The cleaner picked up her dusters and shuffled towards the door. "Quickly!" shouted Mrs. Prig, and the poor old dear picked up her pace until at last she disappeared. "Now take a seat." "Miss Petula Perpetual-Motion," said the headmistress. Petula did just that. She took a seat and danced round the study with it. "I meant sit down," barked Miss Prig. The girl whisked and whirled the chair to the floor and slowly lowered herself onto it. As soon as her bottom touched the chair, she felt an overwhelming urge to bounce up and down on it. So she did. "Be still," demanded Miss Prig, but Petula continued to bounce up and down, the chair squeaking along rhythmically with her bounces. Bounce, squeak, bounce, squeak, bounce, squeak. "Now, needless to say, I want you on your best behaviour during the school trip." "Of course, Miss Prig, as if I would be anything else. Bounce, squeak, bounce, squeak, bounce, squeak." The headmistress was not convinced. She lifted her half-moon spectacles up to her eyes and studied the girl. "The truth is, you have left a trail of destruction behind you wherever you've been at Modesty Place, which is the finest girls' boarding school in the country. I hardly need remind you of the incident in the school dining hall yesterday lunchtime. You began by juggling huge balls of trifle. Before long, they were zooming through the air, heading straight for the teacher's table. At least it saved you all the bother of queuing for dessert, headmistress," replied the little girl. If this was designed to stop Miss Prig from becoming further enraged, it failed miserably. "I was covered from head to toe in trifle," boomed the headmistress, her face now boiling with fury, her teeth on the verge of gnashing. "Only this morning I found a piece of jelly in my ear." "Did you eat it, miss?" inquired the girl politely. "No, I did not eat it." Bounce, squeak, bounce, squeak, bounce, squeak. This noise was really distracting the headmistress now, but she pressed on. "Then there was that time you caused chaos in the art class. You jigged and wiggled, and before you knew it there was a paint sprayed across the walls, windows and ceilings. Our art teacher, Miss Splurge, remarked that she actually rather liked the redecoration." The headmistress chose to ignore this smarty-pants reply. "And the time when you managed to release all the lacrosse balls from the games cupboard. Miss Heft, your poor PE teacher, wobbled over and she was carried off down the pitch on a sea of them." "I do hope they eventually find her," remarked Petula. "I do too," bellowed the headmistress. "Bounce, squeak, bounce, squeak, bounce, squeak." Miss Prig couldn't take it a moment longer. "Will you be still?" she ordered. "Sorry, miss," muttered the girl for a moment. Petula was still, but soon the moment passed. There was a wobble, then a wibble, ending up in a huge wobble. The girl performed a dive roll onto the floor before finishing her acrobatics display with a handstand. "Now, Miss Perpetual-Motion," purred Miss Prig, with a new hint of menace in her voice. "I need the trip to Porcelain Museum to pass without an incident or Modesty Place, founded 1,000 years ago by a nun, no less, could become a laughing stock." "Of course, miss," said the upside-down girl, who was now scuttling across the headmistress's office on her hands like a performing poodle. So I have ordered Modesty Place science teacher, Professor Blink, to come up with a contraption to stop you causing any damage to the priceless antiques." Miss Petula Perpetual-Motion did not like the sound of this at all. "I will be fine without it, thank you, miss," she said. The girl's legs were now doing scissor kicks. As she spoke, her legs sent a pile of school reports flying off the headmistress's desk. They looked like a flock of seagulls taking flight. "No, you will not," barked the headmistress. "What is this contraption, miss?" "Oh, you'll see," said Miss Prig ominously, desperately trying to pluck the sheets of paper from the air. "Now get out!" With that, Perpetual cartwheeled out of the study, booting the newly polished trophies to the floor as she went. Crash, bang, wallop! The day of the school trip arrived, and Professor Blink proudly wheeled her invention out of the science block and into the playground. "There we are, headmistress," said the lady, still sporting her white lab coat and safety goggles, "just as you asked." "Just as you asked." "It's marvellous, Professor," replied Miss Prig. "It looked like a giant toy for a hamster." The science teacher had created a huge, round, see-through inflatable ball, large enough for someone to be placed inside. Of course, that someone was Miss Petula Perpetual-Motion. "I am proud to finally unveil my invention, the bouncing boom boom ball. It is destined to stop juggling children all over the world from destroying everything in their paths. Keep it brief, ordered the headmistress, who only liked the sound of her own voice. Yes, headmistress, replied the science teacher hurriedly. It's very simple. The child who cannot stay still is stuffed in here, she began, indicating a small hatch in the ball. Then, when the child does fidget, the bouncing boom ball will simply bounce off any precious objects nearby, causing 0 damage. At least that was the idea. Splendid, said the headmistress. You may go. It was a long coach ride to the Park Lane Museum. Despite the driver's protestations, the headmistress insisted that Petula travel in the boot so she couldn't cause any damage on the way. As soon as he arrived, the headmistress stuffed Miss Petula Perpetual-Motion into the bouncing boom ball. Then she led her party of schoolgirls inside the museum as Petula bounced along, bringing up the rear. Despite her initial reluctance, inside the bouncing boom ball, the girl began to enjoy it. A smile spread across her face. The museum was a treasure trove of all things porcelain. Porcelain dogs, porcelain cats, porcelain plates, porcelain vases, porcelain teapots, porcelain candlestick holders, porcelain. Every single object was an antique and worth a fortune. Now, girls, needless to say, there was absolutely no touching of any of these items on display, announced the headmistress. I know most of your mammas and papas are filthy rich since they sent you to Modesty Place, which I am proud to say is the most expensive school in the country. However, if you do touch anything and cause it to break, you will have to pay for it yourselves, every last penny. Does your beloved headmistress make herself clear? The pupils murmured. I said, Does your beloved headmistress make herself clear? Yes, miss, replied the girls. Now gather round. The girls huddled round a plinth. On it sat a large ball, with hundreds of tiny flowers hand-painted around the outsides. Petula bounced up and down in her giant ball to try to get a better look. Miss Prigg raised her half-moon spectacles to her eyes. This ball was made in Paris. It once belonged to the last Queen of France, Mary Antoinette, and dates back to the 18th century. Suddenly, in her eagerness to see, Miss Petula Perpetual-Motion bounced so hard that the bouncing boom ball hit the ceiling. From there it rebounded, gathering speed at an alarming rate. Now it was going wham, up and down, shaking the room as it bounced, boom, boom, boom. The headmistress gasped in horror. Miss Petula Perpetual-Motion was bouncing dangerously close to the porcelain pieces. As the bouncing boom ball bounced closer and closer, Miss Prigg stretched out her long thin arms and gave it a shove. This caused the contraption to start ricocheting off the walls, and as all the other schoolgirls watched, their mouths open, it walloped off the priceless porcelain without damaging it all, and then bounced back into the headmistress, sending her tumbling into a porcelain penguin posing on a plinth. No! She screamed. The penguin went flying through the air. It was an unusual sight, as penguins are of course flightless birds, but the wonder of seeing such a bird finally taking flight was soon brought to an abrupt halt. The porcelain penguin smashed against the wall, crash, shattering into hundreds of tiny pieces. All the schoolgirls gasped in horror and delight. You'll pay for that, Miss Perpetual-Motion, shouted the headmistress. But I didn't touch the priceless porcelain. Headmistress, you did, reasoned the girl. Needless to say, this made Miss Prigg blaze with rage. She chased after Miss Perpetual-Motion as the girl bounced off to the other side of the room. Boom, boom, boom. The headmistress raced the bouncing boom ball, this time with her arms and legs outstretched to stop it. But as it bounced off the wall, it sent the lady flying backwards through the air once more. The first thing she hit was a porcelain statue of a swan. The second thing, a life-size porcelain statue of a ballerina. Smash, bang, thwack! The third thing she hit was a porcelain statue of a clown. Wallop! It wasn't one of those happy clowns, it was one of those sad clowns. Sadly, there isn't time to fully explore the clown's emotional state. That's because said clown, along with those other objects flying through the air, was soon nothing more than a shout of porcelain scattering across the floor. Shatter! At this very moment, hearing all the commotion, the elderly museum director came dashing out of his office. He popped his monocle into place to survey the damage. Every single one of the museum's most priceless pieces of porcelain was in pieces. "What is the meaning of this?" he bellowed, waving one of his walking sticks aloft in fury. The headmistress wobbled her feet, crunching porcelain gravel underfoot as she did so. Crunch, crunch, crunch. "I can explain," pleaded the lady. "Who touched the precious, priceless, pleasing porcelain pieces?" demanded the museum director. "Well," the headmistress glanced over at Miss Petula Perpetual-Motion, who, to her surprise, was now bouncing only very gently in her plastic ball. "Well, technically it was me, but—" "No buts!" shouted the museum director. "Lady, you will pay for every last piece." "No!" screamed the headmistress. The girl, who couldn't keep still smirked. The museum's bill came to many millions. On a headmistress's salary, even at the most expensive school in the country, it would have taken 1,000 years for Miss Prig to pay everything back, so she had to take lots of other jobs at Modesty Place. Despite being a very grand woman, the headmistress now had to be at dawn every morning with a mop bucket cleaning the school corridors. At lunch she would be dishing out soup in the dining hall, and after the school, most days Miss Prig could be seen up a ladder, cleaning wet leaves and dead pigeons from the guttering. And if there was one person guaranteed to kick over the headmistress's bucket, send the soup flying through the air, or trip over her ladder, it was, of course, Miss Petula Perpetual-Motion. Some years later, it was Petula's very last day at Modesty Place. She was 18 years old now, and ready to somersault off into the world. That morning, the headmistress had been at dawn unblocking the toilets, and she had been called to the library to clear up some vomit after the librarian had came down with food poisoning. As Miss Prig angrily plonked down her mop and bucket, she spotted her nemesis, Petula, sitting in a corner of the library reading a book. The strange thing was that the girl was sitting perfectly motionless. Miss Prig hid behind some shelves of the books and spied on her most hated pupil. Apart from turning page by page every couple of minutes, Miss Petula Perpetual-Motion did not move a muscle. After an hour of snooping, the headmistress leaped out from behind the shelves. "Aha!" exclaimed the lady. "Gotcha!" "Shh!" shushed Perpetual, her eyes indicating a sign on the wall of the library that said silence. But, the headmistress couldn't contain herself. "You can sit still if you want to." "Yes, I can," replied the girl, "and I've always been able to." "But what about that letter from your mother?" "Oh, that silly old thing. I wrote it myself." 100 years of detention," bellowed Miss Prig. "I'd love to, I really would, but today's my very last day at Modesty Place, and for old time's sake, I'm going to cartwheel out. Farewell, headmistress." With that, Miss Petula Perpetual-Motion leaped on to her hands and spun out of the library, sending every single book flying through the air. Thud, thud, thud. The headmistress was in the library until midnight, picking up all the books and putting them back on the shelves. Then she had to mop up the vomit. So now you know, Miss Petula Perpetual-Motion really was one of the world's worst children. Wonderfully so.